It's the West Tigers podcast, episode number 82. A little bit later than usual, Eddie Otto. A busy week for you. Are you keeping well?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Joel. Looking forward to tomorrow night's game. It's a bit of a graveyard shift, isn't it? 6 o'clock at the SCG.
Against the very much understrength Warriors. We'll get to that game shortly. Let's go back to Parramatta Eels. I think the overriding thing that stands with me out of that Parramatta game, aside from the fact that they are technically a better team than us, and they've got a bit more class, is West Tigers, again, just running out of troops. And, we lost a couple in that game, which didn't help. And I think that was a big contributing factor to us, not being at least closer at the end. Not that it was a hiding.
It went along a similar theme, Joel, as some of our losses to some of the other big sides. Penrith, Canberra, even South Sydney, probably not at the level of Penrith and Parramatta, but what you'd call honourable losses, where after 80 minutes we put in a pretty consistent effort throughout, left nothing in the tank. But I just wonder, you mentioned injuries and they are unlucky, but I just wonder whether it's sort of the style of play that we sort of have to play, given we are not as talented as some of the other teams. We have to throw everything into it, and a casualty of that is sometimes a couple of injuries.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but you mentioned South Sydney. I think they played quite a physical game against us. Penrith obviously did. That was a very physical game, and so did the Eels. But the funny thing is, Eddie, they don't seem to be suffering the injuries that we do. And I know some of that can just be bad luck, but I think you're right. I mean, the West Tigers haven't really played like this ever, and I think it is a contributing factor to the injury toll. I just wonder what the difference is between us and those other teams that seem to be able to do it week in, week out. Get away.
I mean, yeah, there's no doubt that injuries sometimes can be pot luck when it's a hamstring tear or a broken leg or something like that. But Newcastle, another team who've played a really physical brand of football this year under Adam O'Brien, and they've got a massive injury toll. So I just wonder sometimes if a team's trying to change the dynamic of how they play and really prioritise defence and being physical, whether that's maybe a slight byproduct of it. I think most of the injuries came in the forwards on Thursday night against Parramatta. But, I mean, they had, in the end, Joel, they had 10 more sets of 6. I think they ran for over 400 metres. So if you look at those stats and you didn't see the game, you'd say Tigers teams of the past probably would have got beat by 30 points.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Yeah, I think that second half was a shocker. Look, let's quickly divert to something that I didn't tell you that we might talk about. But did you read those TV ratings? The TV ratings for the NRL have sort of fallen off rather consistently through the year. And I think some of it, obviously some of it's the Queensland teams aren't doing so well, but I think the 6 again rule is definitely favouring the better teams. And I know that we've spoken previously, and it seems to be a constant theme, is that the better teams generally get more of the decisions. But for teams like the West Tigers, sometimes the only thing we can do is try and slow down the opposition. But if we're just getting these 6 again, it's not just West Tigers, it's other teams that might be in the the bottom half of the league. I think we're suffering a bit more. It's not really helping us in our chances against the better teams, which is providing more of a lopsided competition.
Interesting point, Joel. I did see that about the ratings, and the first thing I thought of was, well, this is probably the most lopsided competition we've had for a long time. There's probably 4 really good sides. I reckon there's 5 or 6 really bad sides, and there's sides like us in the middle that are scrapping for 7th to 10th. And that wouldn't be a big turn on for a neutral when you've got games where you pretty much know who's going to win. Yeah. And, the 6 again, I think it probably does favour the better sides. I like the rule in general, but you're probably going to get, like you said, more penalties if you're slightly quicker, more athletic side. I saw the penalty count, Joel, was 8-2, and I don't even think that includes 6 agains. I think it was 8 blown penalties, and if they got 5 or 6 agains, it makes it very, very hard to compete. I can't remember who refereed on Thursday night. I found it frustrating again. I don't want to say, it was a completely biased refereeing performance, but if you are losing those 6 agains and you're a side with slightly less talent, there's definitely, opportunities to get blown out.
Yeah, well, the point was driven home to me. It was in the Panthers and the Titans game. I don't know if you watched that game. Grant Atkins I think was the referee. Same referee we had against the Panthers. Very similar. The Titans were obviously trying to to slow down the Panthers. So when you got, well, it comes back to what we've often spoken about. When you have a team that gets across the advantage line, generally you get quicker play the balls. The process goes faster. When you've got big forwards that smash it forward, you get quicker play the balls. And the better teams, the Penriths and the Parramatters and the Roosters have got that. But I saw in that game very much that's what was happening. The Titans were trying to slow the Panthers down, trying to give themselves a chance to reset, like we've seen with the West Tigers at different times during the season. But it was just six again. And you've got no chance of beating these teams, really, because you can't get in that traditional sort of arm wrestle with them.
Well, yeah, I just pull you up there because whenever I look at a game, just the stats, I've looked this year, and our play the ball speed's one of the quickest in the comp, Joel. It's about 3.2 seconds, 3.1, and so maybe we're not getting as many six agains as we should, because I thought that first 25 minutes on the weekend against Parramatta was as fast as we've looked for a long time. We looked really slick. We were getting over the advantage line. We scored a couple of really good tries. And then the possession and the penalties really went against us, and we didn't really get back in the game. But
I think fatigue was a big issue in that, because we obviously get down to the point where we'd lost two guys, and Parramatta had the luxury of two extra players, and they barely used Stefano. But very different dynamic. But I think that was definitely an issue. We were just hanging in there, and sometimes when you're just hanging in there, that's all you can do to stay in the contest, to try and slow the other team down.
Well, that second half was just an onslaught, wasn't it? I mean, they were camped in our half basically for the whole 30 minutes, and I thought that was a pretty good performance, given I think we were down to one on the bench at one point. Obviously, a really nasty incident. Didn't turn out to be a serious injury, but I'm sure all fans were worried about Michael Cheekham and his health when that happened, and then a couple more guys going down. So, yeah, it was a bit of, it went along the similar theme, Joel, was I think for the last 7 or 8 weeks now, we can say West Tigers are a pretty consistent sort of side, which is what we're striving towards. But again, even in those last 7 games, it's only 3 wins and 4 losses. And each team that's above us, we haven't been able to beat any of them yet. So I still think that's going to have to be addressed more in the transfer market than anything on the field, because you can't really say we're not putting in 100%, can you?
Oh, very much so. Well, to put that into context, the last 3 losses that West Tigers have all been less than 10 points. So we're getting close. But I go back to that Parramatta game, Eddie, and I'd say if we didn't have Luke Brooks on the bench, and no offence to Michael Cheekham, if we were able to have we lost Thomas McKaylee, huge factor. If we had Thomas McKaylee there and Zane Musgrove, maybe, with a bit more impact, and we could have held on to our 17 players, I think we would have been I think that's how close we're getting if we continue to play like this. I think it's the bench that consistently not lets us down, but doesn't give us that keep that momentum going. The bench has been, and because we've had these injuries and suspensions, it has been our weak point.
Yeah, true. It's been a balance we've looked at most weeks in the preview, and sort of thought, we'd like a little bit more size on that bench, but I think it's there. I don't think we have to go out and recruit that. We've got Musgrove injured. We've got McKaylee's missed a game. And then we've got Stefano coming next year. And then, I know we're going to talk a bit about Blore. I like the look of the way this pack is building. And I think Madge is doing a great job in moulding it together. We just got to be patient. I know Tigers fans probably hate that word. I think there's more doubts, Joel, over, the backline next year. I mean, there's options there in the spine, but you couldn't say right now anyone in that spine is 100% guaranteed to don that 1, 6, 7 or 9 jersey next year.
Yeah, the spine is an issue for sure. The other thing that I just lost my train of thought. I was going to mention Stefano. Yeah, I mean, big body. He's a giant. He reminds me a little bit of when Keith Galloway first came on the scene. Like, Keith Galloway was huge. It took him a little while to get there. I don't think we should be expecting Petro Civoniceva come round 1 next year with Stefano. I think he's going to be a work in progress for a bit.
Yeah, he'll certainly have an off season to work it out under Madge. He's probably going to get him maybe a little bit fitter, or maybe he wants him big and strong. But we've seen some of those Brisbane forwards who are huge struggle a little bit under the new rules. So, an off-season under Madge. But, Parramatta have played him without really playing the last couple of weeks. So little bit hard to get a gauge. He doesn't look like the most, out there sort of character. He's pretty into himself. We saw Shawn Blore very animated, which I like to see in a young forward. But yeah, still looking forward to seeing another young prop with high rating coming to the club.
Yeah. No, I wish he was with us now. That's for sure. Before we get to Shawn Blore in particular, the hit, the Russell Packer hit on Ryan Matterson. Are you happy to back me in my calls for Russell Packer to have life membership with the West Tigers just for that one play?
Well, Joel, I was going to say, we're meant to be these professional people doing the podcast, but I'm not going to be. I'm just going to say, Russell Packer, whatever bad things I've said about you for at least a week or a month, I take it back, because that was old school rugby league. He had eyes only for Ryan Matterson. And I know Parramatta won the game and they're going well, but that would have been embarrassing for Ryan Matterson. He was essentially knocked out of the game. Russell Packer was hamming it up afterwards, which I thought was fair play. And Tigers fans would have enjoyed seeing that. It was a shame that, Parramatta went on and won the game. It would have bbeen the icing on the cake to beat them and have Matterson off after 15 minutes. But good, clean hit by Russell Packer. I was glad to see we targeted him, and we've got to play him again this year. So I'd be happy to see a similar result. Not on the field, but with the hit like that. I just thought that's it was good to see. You've talked about often. You want to see us hunt as a pack and stand up for each other, and this guy stood us up basically, and they went after him. So fair play.
Yep, respect is a very, very important word around West Tigers. We spoke about the 6 again rule. The crusher tackle issue, I think, is becoming a bigger issue. If you look at what that incident with Nathan Brown, completely foxing. As soon as they got the result, he's up on his feet.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
That was an embarrassing look for Nathan Brown, who's a good hard forward, but that was pretty ordinary, where he's holding his neck and then the penalty's blown and he's sprung up like he's a 100-meter Usain Bolt. He sprung up, so that was poor. But teams are coached to do it. I'm sure they are. Joel, if we're level in the game with 5 minutes to go and someone cops a dicey crusher, I'd be happy for him to stay down and get the penalty. But it's not a great look. No,
I don't know how they can sort of combat that. Shawn Blore, I put on Facebook when just at the end of the game, I said I really haven't seen a guy that looked as comfortable in first grade in their debut as he did. I thought, as everybody has been saying, he's obviously big raps very, very early on in his career. But from what I saw, I very much liked what I saw, and I think that an edge back rower is where he is probably best suited moving forward.
Yeah. Well, we've got sort of depth in numbers in the back row, but we're looking for that standout player, aren't we? And someone with aggression and who can break the advantage line. It was probably more defensively where he caught the eye rather than offensively in this game. Now, obviously, we saw that little sequence where Nathan Brown ran straight at him 3 times and he smashed him all 3 times, and that's great, old school rugby league, and he wasn't afraid to say, come at me again. And, I love seeing that. It sort of shows you that this kid is not overwrought. He's ready. I know it's a debut though. It's only half an hour. I don't want to go over the top. There was a lot of excitement on the forum afterwards, and it was a really good debut. But I just want to see him back it up for a few weeks, maybe get a few big minutes. But I mean, it's certainly more exciting, Joel, having Shawn Blore on the bench than having a McQueen or a Chris Lawrence, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and fingers crossed. And we've said before, we're due for some good luck. We're due for a guy like Shawn Blore to come along and be sort of our, hopefully potentially, a real impact player and a real, like the Bulldogs got it with Sonny Bill Williams back in the day, and other teams have got these guys come through, and it would be nice if it could happen for us. He's only contracted for next year apparently, so I think we need to make sure that we're not too lackadaisical with wrapping him up and letting anybody else in with a big offer.
Sure, I didn't know that, but you've seen what's happened with Fafita. Brisbane let his contract run down to sort of the last year and a bit, and clubs can bounce 12 months in advance, which is what we've been doing, poaching some good youngsters, which I like, but we've got to look after our own as well.
You mentioned the spine. There's a little bit of talk about Harry Grant. I mean, there seems to be Harry Grant talk all the time, and that will continue on. Because talking about that Melbourne will lose Smith or Grant, i.e. Not Cameron Smith, although there's some talk of Cameron Smith is going to Brisbane. It's crazy time, isn't it? I think Cameron needs to make a decision for everybody's sake, doesn't he? Put this to bed. But I'm sure the West Tigers are monitoring the situation very closely.
Well, it was interesting a few weeks ago when Madge was asked about Harry Grant, and he diverted to saying how well Brandon Smith was playing. And I thought that was a subtle message to say, hello, Brandon Smith. You know, if Harry does go back to the Storm, you're going to be squeezed out and we're interested in you. But, yeah, it's all going to play out. I'm still not optimistic, but hopeful that we might be able to secure him for another year. If Cameron Smith wants to go on, I can't see Cameron Smith going to the Broncos at this stage of his career. But in saying that, Joel, we're pretty, it's one of the positions where I think a lot of clubs would be fairly envious. I mean, I think Jacob Liddell, I've always been a fan. I know he's had a million injuries, a bit like Benji when he was young. And, Jake Simpkins, I watched some of his highlights from his career in Queensland, junior career, and he looks, strong. I know he's probably 18 months, 2 years behind in development given his age, but high raps on him. So, even if worst case Harry goes, it's not like we have to go out and get a Brandon Smith, is it?
Well, conversely, you'd probably, if we were able to, get Harry Grant on a deal, then you'd have to look at Jake Simpkin and Jacob to move them on, because you'd have two spots in that. You can't carry that many hookers over 2 or 3 years. So that would certainly change that dynamic, because you've got Billy Walters there potentially as a backup and hooker, and other options. Moses Mbai, for example.
Well, I'm sure other clubs will be keeping a close eye on it, because we know young rated player like Simpkin, he'd be hooker's a very valuable position, and even Jacob Liddell. Like if I was at Canterbury, I'd be more interested in a Jacob Liddell than say an Andrew McCulloch or Isaac Luke or someone like that who's been around a bit. Jacob, he's probably pretty close to being fit, which is exciting. I wonder if I think Harry should be playing the 80, but I wonder if Madge will consider playing a second hooker on the bench when he gets fit.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends how the next few weeks go as well. Are we going to make the 8?
I'll stick with no, but look, I've really circled the next 3 weeks, and they have to be 3 wins, Joel. There's no other way around it. Warriors, Knights with a lot of injuries, and then Bulldogs. So 2 should be gimmies. We know they're not. 2 should be gimmies, and that middle game at Newcastle, I think they're in a bit of trouble at the moment. So if we can beat them and get to 8 wins and 6 losses, run home is a nightmare, but it sets you up with real momentum. So nothing less than 3 wins will do next 3 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, before we talk about the Warriors, we have had some signing news, which was Asu Kepaoa. I think that's the way it's pronounced. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but otherwise known as AJ. Seen some highlights, and he's got some big raps, but neither of us have ever seen him play. But I think that we have needed some speed, and fingers crossed about Shawn Blore, and fingers crossed that AJ comes and is able to grab that left wing spot and give us some pace out there. No disrespect to Tommy Talau, who's playing exceptionally well.
Be good to get Adam Hardigan back on in the next few weeks, because obviously he was in the Roosters system, so I'm sure he was aware of this young guy when we went after him, because we signed him for 3 years, Joel. It's not like we signed him for the rest of the year, so obviously think he can make his way into this backline. We are desperately lacking pace. I know David Noffalim has been great this year, but there's still that when I look at other backlines, there's 1 or 2 sort of match winners or guys who will not be run down. So I haven't seen the highlights of him yet. He's probably got an opportunity to break into the backline this year, but it's certainly an area we need to address is pace. Yeah.
Well, just back to that, Adam Dewey, who we've said in the past and observed, I think most fans have observed, he seems to really struggle with that initial pace. He just seems really slow off the mark. Are you a little bit less confident with him as a long-term fullback? I've heard some things that he might be carrying an injury, but he never looked that speedy really from day one.
Yeah, well, I was never 100% sold that he was a a long-term fullback. I thought he was the best option for this year, like you did over Corey Thompson. But yeah, I mean, the thing that sort of surprised me a little bit was I knew he wasn't a speedster, but when he went through that gap against Penrith, he had 15 metres on them, and they ran him down, by the halfway line. So I like him as a footballer, but again, it's just that thing. Is he gonna? I think no one can quite answer that. Is he a 1? Is he a 6? Could he grow into a 13? It's all up for grabs. I'd be very interested to be a fly on the wall at Concord, because they'd be talking about the spine for the next 2-3 years.
Yep.
And there's so many balls in the air. I'm sure, with the greatest of respect, they're trying to probably move Josh on again at the end of this year. And I'd be probably telling Benji it's time to hang him up. So, no offense to Billy Walters. I like him as a player, but whether he can be an NRL standard 5'8", week to week against the bigger sides, I've got question marks about that. So can Adam Dewey be the 6 next year? There's a lot of question marks. And then you've got our halfback, who's, probably one of our highest paid players, who's languishing on the bench at the moment and not particularly making a huge amount of impact. So I just wonder what Madge is thinking there.
Yeah, well, when you start thinking, there's rumours Kieran Foran going back to Manly and Josh Reynolds going back to the Bulldogs, which I think would be a good thing. I think it'd be good for Josh to move on. It's only the last year, so I'm not that worried. But the thing is that you talk about, move Adam Dewey, but who are you going to play at fullback? Unless the thought is to play the AJ, who is known as a fullback as much as a winger, to play him at fullback, potentially, with a Josh Addo-Carr on the wing, and Tommy Talau and Joey Leilua in the centres, and Dewey at 5'8". Doesn't leave a lot of space for the co-captain, or either of the two co-captains.
No. There were rumours at the start of the year about Alex Johnson, and we ended up getting Adam Dewey. It'd be great to have another, Tedesco light come through your system where you sort of just don't have to go out and find, because there's not many big names off contract next year, and fullback is such a key position. So, still to play out. I'm not bagging Dewey. I think he's a solid option. He's been very safe this year. But yeah, we're wanting, and maybe Joel, if you recruited an Addo-Carr as a winger, and this AJ boy is another winger, and you get some speed in your side, it doesn't matter so much if your fullback is not a superstar.
Yeah. No, you're right. He's safe. I am a fan. I think he's a good player. I don't know if the pace is because of an injury or what they're thinking, but yeah, it seems like the spine, as you mentioned earlier, there's quite a few question marks there for the spine for 2021.
And Joel, I was just going to say, I saw something today. It was every club's 3 highest paid players. I don't know if it's 100% accurate. I know we've gone over this 1,000 times, but it said Moseson by 815,000, Josh Reynolds 850,000, and Russell Packer 750,000. So Joel, we really should be Canterbury at the moment. With 3 signings like that on that money, we should be running last. I think I know Tigers fans are sort of impatient. It's been 8 years without finals, but with that sort of poor deals and so much money tied up in players that are either can't make the team or playing in the centres, or Russell Packer sort of in and out, that's over $2 million. And we're playing, I think, above ourselves considering those 3 poor contracts.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and it's a credit to the other guys who are doing and performing at a level that they're probably not quite being paid for at this point. So
exactly, and that's one thing about Madge. And actually saw Madge today, Joel, at Coogee Oval. I was doing a fitness sort of session of sorts, and he was down at Coogee Oval. Looked like, I don't know if he's got a son, but it looked like he was putting his son through his paces. And it's just you look at that blueprint of Parramatta with Brad Arthur and Canberra with Ricky Stewart. Now those coaches have been there probably 5 or 6 years now, and they've really got the side they want. Yeah. They've been able to turn those clubs around. So, and they're clubs that don't necessarily attract the biggest names, but I think if we see that, as a blueprint, then there's no reason in a couple of years Madge can't have us really firing with the side he wants.
There's no chance that Madge's son wants to play halfback for South, Salon?
I think he's only a little fella, Joel. I think he's only 9 or 10. So I know they're going to let this 17-year-old play for South, but I don't know if they're letting a 12 or 13-year-old. It might not even be Madge's son, but he had a couple of kids running around. He wasn't smiling either. He was putting them through their paces.
Yeah. Well, if you're a teacher, you'd know all about it. Eddie, just speaking about Madge, do you think we should lock him up for another couple of years? There's been some debate about that on the West Tigers forum.
Absolutely. And, I know Madge is a man of honour and whatnot, but I think they changed the rules because of our mate Ivan Cleary, but, what's stopping a Brisbane going out now and saying, look, we need a hard man. Who's the best candidate available? It's Michael Maguire. And what's stopping them saying, we're going to offer you 5 years, 2022 onwards. So we'd be mad not to be. I'm not saying go and re-sign him for 10 years or something crazy, but, I think he's off. What? Is he off at the end of next year?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd be saying 2 years straight up, end of 2023. And if you haven't, after 5 years, if you haven't done the job, then that's a fair chunk. Yeah. But I just think, Joel, we don't want to find a situation in 6 months where all of a sudden 3 or 4 clubs are looking for a good coach and they think, well, Madge is off contract in 12 months, let's go after him.
Yeah. And I think that locking him up now, the other side of it, there's always the focus on what's good for Madge, but what's good for West Tigers, for the players, the potential recruits to know what our plan is for those years. So there's an advantage to that as well, especially when you've had a rocky road of coaches like we've had, which I think is still definitely in the back of some people's mind.
Yeah, well, I think we've got one of the top 5 coaches in the competition. I think, there's not many sure bets. I know results are still similar to what they were, but, outside of Bellamy and Robinson, maybe 1 or 2 others, Hasler. I'm glad we had Madge ahead of Wayne Bennett. So let's lock him in, Joel, for another couple of years.
And he's not blowing kisses to any opposition fans. That's a real good exercise.
No, he's not.
All right. The Warriors at the SCG, as you say, 6 o'clock, the early game, the graveyard shift. The Warriors, this smacks of a real. This makes West Tigers fans anxious. This is baby Broncos. They've had players go back overseas. They've struggled. They haven't scored more than 20 points. I think it was in 9 of their 11 games, or it was this year. I saw that stat. West Tigers have been doing well. It's a. I know we've said it before. It's absolutely a must-win game.
Yeah, well, we go back to that Gold Coast game, and I was very, very confident that it wouldn't happen, and all of a sudden, the last place team come out and beat us. And look, the Warriors, they only lost by 8 to the Roosters last week. They're not a team of mugs. I know they've got a lot of issues, but they've still got some good players like Tuivasa Sheck, and the halves have got Blake Green and Nikorima. But they have got their issues. I mean, they have players going home and so long on the road. If we put in a professional 80-minute performance, we will win this game comfortably. But it's not played on paper, is it, Joel? You've got to go out and do the job. So I'm confident. I'd be shocked and furious if we lost. But let's wait and see.
Good to see Alex Twile back. I think we've missed that Alex and Matt Eisen, who has been out. Matt, to his credit, has been playing very well. Obviously, looked a bit injured against the Eels. I think starting to get some troops back. I think BJ is back next week from his suspension. Interesting, Josh Reynolds available, but not even considered. I thought that was quite interesting. But I'm still not 100% sold on having Luke Brooks on the bench.
No, I wonder whether it's just Madge is really like Benji. It wasn't, a token dropping for 1 week. Instead, we're going to make you wait 4 or 5 weeks and really get hungry and get motivated. And maybe Madge is thinking, well, we can win this game against the Warriors with Billy Walters in the halves. I don't think he's convinced that this is the best halves combination for the rest of the year. I think he's lit a fire under Luke Brooks. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in the starting lineup in the next couple of weeks. But Billy Walters has been solid. Josh Reynolds for me was okay, but that he was giving away a lot of penalties, and now he's missed more time. So there's options there, but I think when we get to the crux of it in the last 6 weeks, I think we might see Marshall and Brooks back in the halves. Right. Yeah, I don't think it's ideal, like you said, carrying a half back on the bench.
No, if you had 3 monsters, it'd be a different story, but we just haven't. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, Joel, with that team, I know they've done a solid sort of job defensively, but it's uninspiring seeing Chris Lawrence and Moses Zumbai as our centre combination.
Yeah.
I'd like to either see, Talau move to centre or BJ. I'm looking forward to BJ coming back. I know he copped a roasting for what he did. I thought he got a couple of weeks too long.
Yeah.
I think it might be the makings of him for the rest of the year. I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping he is the X factor that comes back and enables us to get over the Knights and get over the Bulldogs. And, if we can get this Warriors game and get a few more troops back in the next few weeks, and, it should hopefully, that's the plan. But we've made plenty of plans in the past and none of them worked out. So.
Well, we're sitting in our favourite position at the moment, Joel. 9.
Yeah. So close, so far. All right, let's leave it there, Eddie.
Excellent.
Have a good weekend.
Beauty. Go the Tigers. See you, mate.
See you next week.